Welcome to Bird Dog Yoga, here with a Blitz and I, as always. I had a request for, what do we do if we have tight hips? Are you feeling tight in your hips? Is it my hip flexors? Do I need to strengthen in my glutes and my low back? So we'll kind of go over how can we test if our hip flexors are tight, or do they need to do a little bit of strengthening, and how can we get into those areas? So feel free to join us. Go ahead and find a block or a bed, something solid that you'll be able to lay back on. I'm also going to go over some movements that involve an elastic band, maybe even a tennis ball and a block. So gather up all your things and we'll get right into it. All right, first thing we're going to do is test our hip flexors and see, one, are our hip flexors tight, or are they needing to be strengthened, and maybe we need to do a little bit of work in the glutes as well. So what you'll do is you will find a box or a bed, something solid and comfortable that you can lay on and extend your legs over the edge of it, something that's going to hold you up and you feel steady. So once you find that, we'll come on down to the edge of our bed or our box and lie on down on our back. Kind of adjust yourself so that your glutes are towards the edge of the bed or the box, and hug your knees into your chest, relaxing the upper body down. Give yourself a little rock from side to side so that the spine is flat to the earth. So think about hugging the belly button. I don't know if you can see here, hugging the belly button up and in so that you can plant the low back to the earth and there's no air or no little curve in the spine. So planting down, engaging the core there, keeping the right leg in. We'll tuck it in and extend the left leg down towards the ground, trying to see if we can get the thigh parallel to the bed, or even trying to bring our toes down to the earth. So for me right here, I have plenty of length in my hip flexor. So that would tell me that I need to maybe do a little bit of hip flexor strengthening if I'm feeling tight in the hips. If you are stuck up about here or can't quite get the leg down parallel to the bed or the toes down towards the earth, that's the indicator that your hip flexors are actually tight. So we want to make sure we test both sides. So give yourself a little rock, get that spine nice and flat to the earth, belly buttoned in towards the spine, and then we'll relax the right leg down and kind of notice how this side feels compared to the other. You might be way off from side to side. One side might be way tighter than the other. That's totally normal. And just kind of determine, okay, how does each side feel? So for me, it feels like both my hip flexors have plenty of length in them. So I might want to do a little bit of hip flexor and core strengthening. So next, we'll go into what we do for lengthening and then also strengthening of the hip flexors, depending on what just happened in your little test. All right, now that we've determined whether or not we need to lengthen or strengthen our hip flexors, we'll focus on what we want to do if our hip flexors are actually tight and we need to lengthen them. So in your test, if you couldn't get your thigh parallel to the bed or the box, that's telling us we need to lengthen the hip flexor. And easy enough, the test that we did to figure out what we needed to do with the hips is also a great stretch for lengthening in the hip flexor. So you'll come back down onto that box, relax down. Again, get the back nice and flat to the earth, hug one knee in towards the chest, and you'll extend the other leg long and kind of let gravity do its thing. So we don't want to muscle into it, relaxing the back down to the bed or the box and keeping that right knee tucked in. You can hang out here for about 30 seconds or so. Again, not trying to muscle it, just kind of letting gravity and the body melt into this position. And then you'll switch it out and relax the other leg down. Again, holding this for about 30 seconds or so. Just remembering to breathe, try to relax into it. And then you'll bring that knee back in. And you can do about 2 to 3 times on each side. And then we'll move on to the next stretch. Second stretch we can do to help lengthen in the hip flexors if we determine that they are tight is something called a couch stretch. I have my box here, but you are more than welcome to use a couch or even a cushion chair is pretty comfortable on the feet. So what that looks like is you face away from your couch, your chair, your box, whatever you're using, and step one leg forward. I'm going to step my right foot forward into this lunge position. Using my hands on the ground, I'll start to walk my left knee closer towards the block or the couch, whatever you're using, and bringing the left foot up onto that box or couch. And from here, you just kind of settle into this position, maybe walking that front foot forward, sinking your hips down and forward towards the floor. Using your breath here to sink in. You should feel that stretch right away across the front of the left thigh, maybe down even into the quad area. You can stay down here on the hands if this is plenty enough stretch for you, or if you have a block, you can bring your hands onto a block. Or I like to bring my hands up to my thighs. Now you're gonna feel that right away in the front of the left hip. So try not to, we immediately want to dump into that low back. So try to squeeze the left glute, even pressing into the front heel, so we can stack the shoulders over the hips. And then again, we'll use our breath here. So take a big inhale, lengthen, squeeze the left glute nice and tight. And then as you exhale, sink into that stretch. Inhale, lengthen up through the spine, squeeze the left glute, engage. And then exhale, you sink into that stretch. You'll repeat this a couple of times. You can hang out here for about 30 to 45 seconds, and then you'll gently make your way out and release that bent leg. If you're feeling a little bit of pressure in that bottom knee, feel free to bring a pillow, a towel, roll up a blanket underneath there, give a little bit of cushion to that bottom knee so you're not feeling any pain in that area. Final stretch that we will move into is your typical half pigeon pose. A couple ways you can get into this. If coming into that traditional half pigeon where you bring that front shin almost parallel to the front of your space, or even in that 45-degree angle, if that's uncomfortable for you, you can come on down to your back and cross your ankle over the top of your thigh. So you'll start by bending both knees, keep the left knee bent, foot down, and cross the right ankle over the top of the thigh, creating this kind of figure four shape. Keeping the left foot on the ground, and you can just gently guide the right knee open, or you can start to bring the knee in towards your chest and grab for the back of the thigh. This will be more of an outer hip stretch, but again, that hip flexor psoas muscle runs from the back of the hip up to the front of the hip bone. So you're gonna hit that area even lying on your back here in this figure four stretch. Kind of give a little rock from side to side. So that's option one if that feels most comfortable on your knees. Or coming into our traditional half pigeon pose where you bring one leg forward into that 45-degree angle, and that back leg lengthens long behind you. And you square off the hips, pulling the right hip forward, or right hip back, left hip forward, whatever knee is forward, drawing that right hip back. And then lengthening up through the spine, relaxing in the lower body. If you're feeling this in the low back, squeezing the left glute. Again, we're engaging the glute so that we can let the front muscles start to relax into this shape. You can stay lifted or lower down onto the forearms into that sleeping pigeon shape. Another option that I like to take is you can use your box if you have a tall box, or even a chair that has a decent height. That depends on your body height and your proportions also. So finding something that works for you. You can take the shin on top of that box and move into this half pigeon shape here while you're standing up. You can even walk that back foot back to intensify the outside edge of that hip so that you can keep the shoulders nice and stacked, lift up and press through the back toes. Another great option there. So for the half pigeon, you'll hold for about 45 seconds to a minute on both sides. And that is it for our stretching out of our hip flexors. Now that our hip flexors are stretched out and we've got some length in them, we also want to focus on to help lengthening in the hip flexors, strengthening in the glute area. That will help take a little bit of pressure off the front side muscles, trying to do all the work for us, and strengthen the glutes and the back of the legs to help with a little bit of that weight. So for our first exercise, we will use an elastic band. If you do not have an elastic band at home and you have maybe a small dumbbell or something with a little bit of weight to it, you can use that as well. But it's not required. You can still do this movement without a band or weights. So if you have your band, you're gonna take it up and around your thighs, just above your knees, and come on down to one hip. I'm gonna start on my left hip with my left forearm down, propping myself up here. You'll find a 45-degree angle with the knees. You don't want your knees up in towards your chest. You want them back a little bit so that your heels are in line with your hips all the way up through the shoulders. So one long line through the crown of the head, all the way out through the toes. Now, keeping your big toes together, pressing down into the earth with the left leg, you'll start to lift the right knee up and back as far as you can, pulling that band apart. If you have that weight, it's gonna go on top of the thigh here. You're just gently resting. We're not holding down or pressing. You'll just lift that weight up and hold right here. We'll hold for 10 seconds. So you'll want to breathe here, big inhales and exhales. Holding and pressing the back of the right thigh out and away, engaging through the right obliques, pressing down through that left thigh, and then you'll gently release. So you'll repeat that 5 times total. So you inhale, lift, hold for the 10 seconds, and then lower back down. 5 times to each side, and you can repeat those reps maybe 2 to 3 times through, depending on how your hips are feeling. Maybe start with 2 reps, once or twice a day, and then add on another round as you feel more comfortable. One more glute exercise to engage in the backside body. We'll do some single leg bridge lifts here. Coming on down to your back, lying down, and planting the soles of the feet to the mat. I'm gonna start with my left side, so my left foot will stay down. You'll wanna first walk your heels in as close to your glutes as you can. Arms can be down by your side if that's comfortable, or just place them wherever it feels good. Extending the right leg high. Take a moment to roll out your ankle, maybe bend into the knee and re-straighten it a couple of times. And then we'll hold right here with the right leg lifted. Now, pay attention to how the right hip flexor is feeling. If you have tight hamstrings, like I do, I'm right away, I feel some sensation and intensity in my right hip flexor. We are not aiming to engage in the right hip flexor here. So don't be afraid to bend into this right knee. So you can find that sweet spot where the right hip starts to let go a little bit, because we're going to want to focus on the left glute. So bend the knee as much as you need to, so you can kind of let that right hip relax, then press through your left heel and reach the hips up towards the sky into that single leg bridge. Holding right here, we'll hold for 10 seconds again, just like we did in our other exercise. Hugging the belly up and in, we're engaging the core. We're pressing firmly through that left foot. You should start to feel that shake and burn on that left glute area. And then you slowly lower down and let that go. So you'll repeat that again, 5 reps total to each side. So press through the left heel, reach up, you'll hold for 10 seconds, and then slowly lower it back down. So again, repeat from right to left, 5 reps to each side, holding for 10 seconds. You can do 2 to 3 rounds, again, depending on how your hips and your body is feeling. Maybe you add some rounds each time as you start to get more comfortable and feel some strength build in the glute area. So moving away from, we're working on lengthening the hip flexors and strengthening in the glutes for those of us who have the tight hip flexors based on our test we did at the beginning of this video. So we're gonna switch gears now and move to, what do we do if we have the length in the hip flexors, but we're still feeling that sensation in our hip joints and in our back? Now we need to work on strengthening the hip flexors if that's the case for us. So we'll go through a couple exercises to strengthen, activate in that front side muscle group. First movement, we will use a band again. You do not have to use a band. This is still going to be effective even without the band, but it does add a little bit of resistance and intensifies this movement. You'll bring the band around the soles of the feet, and then you'll lay down on your back again, extending the legs long out in front of you. So right away, we will pull our feet apart from each other. So they're about hip width distance, maybe a little bit wider. And we want to plant our low back down into the earth to engage our core right away. You'll start to feel this sensation on the outside of your thighs right away just from that resistance of pulling the feet apart. Now, keeping that distance between the feet, ground down through the left leg, flex the toes back towards your nose, and start to drive your right knee in towards your chest, and we'll hold right here for about maybe 3 to 4 seconds. Keep pressing the low back down, and then release that right leg out to the side, back to that hip width distance. We're keeping resistance the entire time. Now we bend the left knee in towards the chest, drive it in, hold, and then release it back down. And we'll just alternate from right to left, moving nice, slow, and controlled, finding that hold from side to side, in and out, still pressing our low back down. Beautiful. And you'll repeat that for maybe 6 to 8 reps on each leg. I like to be nice and even, so just make sure you even it out from side to side. Last 2 movements here to find some strengthening in the hip flexor and hip area. These are pretty common movements. We've got our lunges, and then we also have some squats. So if you're familiar with lunges and squats, you can take this to wherever you want, spice it up however you'd like to. I'm just gonna demo some traditional lunges and some traditional squats. So first, doing that backwards lunge, maybe tapping the back knee. Still wanna draw the chest up and back. You're gonna feel the tension in that right side, and then press off all the way up to the top, moving nice, slow, and controlled, alternating from side to side, doing about 6 to 8 reps on each leg, and then you'll repeat for about 2 to 3 rounds. Perfect, there's our lunges. And then ending with our squats. If you like to do weighted squats, feel free. Otherwise, you're gonna bring your feet about hip width distance, heels in, toes out. I like to bring my hands up and behind my head to engage my core a little bit more. You can always bring your hands to heart center. If you wanna add the band on the outside of the thighs for that little bit of resistance, that's an option as well. So sinking down into the hips, and then using that exhale all the way up to the top. So we inhale down, and exhale up. So showing from the side, keeping that chest up, shoulder stack, tilting that tailbone down, and then standing up and squeeze the glutes at the top. So it's not a hip thrust at the top. You're just squeezing and engaging the glutes. Lower down, lift up and squeeze. So those are our 2 additional movements to help strengthen the hip flexors. Ending our hip focus practice with a little bit of myofascial release. I would recommend doing this regardless if your hip flexors are tight, or if you are working on strengthening your hip flexors. This is a wonderful thing to do either after you've done your workout, or maybe when you're getting ready to go for your workout, or even just like a walk, or after you've been sitting at your desk all day to help release in the hip area. 2 options here. We have one, which I recommend, it's a little bit the easiest to get into and the most comfortable, I would say, is grabbing a ball. It can be a tennis ball. This is a myofascial release ball. You can get them on Amazon. They are the consistency of a lacrosse ball, if you know what that is like. They're nice and firm. The tennis balls can tend to be a little bit more squishy, so you get a little bit more sensation with the myofascial release or lacrosse ball. So I'll show that option first. What you'll do is you're gonna lay down on your belly over the ball. I'll show you where the ball should be placed. So you have your hip bone right here, and then you also have your pubic bone in the middle as well. So you want that somewhere in the middle along that psoas muscle. So not on the actual hip bone and not in the middle on your bladder, just somewhere in there. If you have sensation in the hip flexors, you're gonna know where it needs to be once you start to lay down. So you'll lay your ball down and start to drape yourself over the ball in that psoas muscle area. So find that first spot that feels okay. I'm not gonna say it feels good. For some of us, this can be really intense. So use the support of your forearms and maybe even the support of the right. So I'm starting on the left side, you can tuck the right toes to kind of help lift your hips up off of the ball a little bit until you start to relax down over the ball. And once you get kind of comfortable here, kind of using your breath to settle in. You can take some gentle rocks from side to side, from right to left, imagining that psoas muscle is like a rope that runs up and down. So as you sway from side to side, kind of massage over that muscle. So as you're rocking side to side, you can start to shift the hips forward. So it goes down on the hip, and then shift your hips back so that it goes up onto the top of the hip. And just kind of move around, figure out where that sweet spot is. Maybe if there's a spot that you just kind of need to hang out and settle over. You can bring your right knee out to the side like a half frog shape that can intensify the sensation over the ball. Another great option is so you lengthen both legs long behind you. Then the leg that's over the ball, the hip that's over the ball, you'll bend that knee up towards the ceiling. You might just right away feel that and say, okay, that's good right there. Or you can start to windshield wiper the foot in and out. So wherever that ball is planted, if it's on that little trigger point area, it's gonna massage right to left and kind of pin down that muscle. So just hang out on one side for you can even hang out for like 1 to 2 minutes, kind of massaging back and forth, and then you'll switch to the other hip. So that is the option with the ball. I'll show quickly the option with the block. Again, some people don't prefer the block. It can be either not comfortable or some people prefer it. So same thing, you're gonna find the tip of the block on the outside. That's gonna hang out in that trigger point area, similar to where we had the ball. Then the top half of the block is gonna be kind of underneath the upper chest and rib cage area. So you'll set the block down long ways and kind of start to settle over the block on the edge and let the hip bone kind of drape over the side of the block. And I like to bring my right knee out to the side right away. I'll kind of turn to the side so you can see. Kind of like to bring that right knee out to the side right away, has a little bit of support. For me, the leg long behind actually adds more pressure on the block. So this kind of supports it so I can lift myself up and off of the block as I start to feel ready to find some depth. You don't get as much movement from side to side as you do with the ball as you're over the block. So just kind of play around with what feels good, maybe a tiny little rock, but mostly just hanging out and breathing. And again, you can hang out there for about a minute or so. I wouldn't necessarily say you would need to do both the block and the ball back to back. You can choose one or the other. Do 2 to 3 minutes on each side and then call it good. So that is it for our hip work today. Hopefully this has been helpful for you and you can take these exercises. I recommend doing them 1 to 2 times a day and see if you notice any difference as you move throughout your exercises or your sport, whatever you are working on. And you can increase it, change it up however you need to, adjusting to what your body's telling you really. So every day can be different. You could be really tight in the hip flexors one day, and then the other day you need to strengthen them. So really listen to your body, and thank you for joining Blitz and I. He's taking a much needed nap after all that fun hip work. So I will see you all next time.